Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Jess, and today, as far as hosts go, I am the only regular host you're going to be hearing from because the guys, Alex and Eric, have graciously stepped away to allow room for a conversation that we've actually really wanted to have for a while on the podcast. And I want to say a little bit about that. When the guys or myself are not on an episode, we graciously and intentionally choose to step away to give more people a voice in a conversation that we want to have. And today we're talking about different perspectives of moms, specifically moms that are working inside and outside of the home, and those different struggles and perspectives. And before you write off this conversation, just think about the different ways that different roles in our lives affect our identity, how different roles that we have affect the way that we view others, or maybe we judge other people. Our culture is very opinionated, and this is a conversation that I think a lot of times as a mom myself, we feel uncomfortable or maybe we feel unseen. And how often, maybe if you're not a mom, you're still struggling and feeling those same feelings. And so we want to step into conversations with moms. We want to step into the different roles that they have, and we want to hear about their perspectives and just how much this affects their lives, the way that they live their lives, and also how it affects their faith journeys. And so today I'm joined by three amazing women. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yay, I'm so glad. We're just going to go around and maybe introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your family, maybe how many kids you have, and then a little bit about your work history, kind of like what's happening with you or what perspective you're coming from today. Let's start with you, Stephanie.
My name's Stephanie, and I have two kiddos. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and work experience. I've worked at UNMC for like 17 years, and then right after I got married, I went to part-time on-call, full-time permanent part-time, so I work 20 hours a week. Just this last year, we decided to homeschool, so I have stepped away from that position just this last year, but for the majority of my motherhood, I was working 20 hours a week, and then balancing time at home.
Nice.
And I'm Caitlin, and I have 3 boys, ages 4, almost 2, and 2 months. And in my background, I used to work in restaurants and the hospitality industry. My husband's a chiropractor, and so I've actually worked with him a bit in the office. But actually, prior to having kids, I stepped away to do my own business at home. And then after having kids, I've really just kind of put that on the side too, and I'm just a full-time stay-at-home mom now.
Okay, awesome.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kim, and I'm representing a full-time working mom. I have a husband of 12 years and a daughter who is 10, and I'm a pharmacist who does education in a 4-state territory. So I'm on the weekly, gone a couple nights a week, a couple days, and so that was something that was a huge adjustment for us as we had our daughter, and I'm fortunate to have a husband who stays at home and has some side businesses and things to keep him busy, but keep him also focused on our daughter, which I think has been a great blessing for us.
That's great. Well, thanks again for everybody for being here. As we're thinking about motherhood and everything that entails, first I kind of want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you each face in the different roles that you play. And I would even say the stereotypes that you've encountered in what happens in your day-to-day lives. So whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, I think for the stay-at-home mom, I think the typical stereotype is that we just stay in our pajamas all day, and that we just have this like really relaxed, easy time, that we don't really do a whole lot, and that, you know, oh, that must be nice. You get to stay home, and like, oh, that kind of like that's easy type thing. So, which is not the case. There are days that I do stay in my pajamas, but it's not necessarily an intentional thing.
It's not by choice.
No. So I think that's probably the biggest stereotype or misconception I've gotten.
How about a challenge?
Challenge. I would say the biggest challenge that I've felt being a stay-at-home mom is it really comes back to identity. And when you have a job and you're in the workforce, you get that immediate feedback. A lot of times you have those, KPIs, like, how are you doing? Have you met your goals? Have you done this and that? And so when I transferred into just being being at home with the boys, you don't have that anymore. Like, you don't really get feedback as to like, how did you do today? Like, did you how are your meals? How did you disciple your children? Like, it's just kind of this like, well, I did the best I could today. And honestly, and usually the feedback that you get is like all the things that you've done wrong. Like, I didn't make the sandwiches right today, or, they don't have the right toy that they wanted and all that stuff. And so it's like, well, I'm doing great. So it really forces you to like reflect on like, okay, like, is my significance truly being found in the Lord, or is it being found in my circumstances? Am I truly choosing joy despite what's happening around me? Or am I letting my circumstances define my attitude? So that's probably been like the biggest growing thing for me, and the biggest challenge for me is just really reminding myself like, okay, my portion and my significance is in God, and really playing that like long game for things. That's probably been a big thing.
Yeah. How about for the rest of you?
I would say for me, I can immediately think of challenges. So I think a couple of challenges are, one, guilt, mom guilt, being away from my family, being away from my daughter. And when I come home and I spend that time, I feel like I'm sacrificing at times friendships with other moms, with other women, because I'm away. And so when I'm back, I feel like 100% I need to devote my time to just my husband and my daughter. And with that came a realization of, spending so much of my adult life being on my own, and then finally, settling down and getting married and becoming a mom. I was burning the candle at both ends and just feeling like I could always make it go, and I had all the balls in the air and nothing ever dropped. And then I realized I was like completely pouring from an empty cup. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I wasn't spending time with God in the morning. And so I created a morning routine about a year and a half into my daughter's life, because I was just burnt out. And so what ended up happening is it was an adjustment for the family to realize that I was having some mom time, some me time, in the basement, doing my workout, doing my devotions, and really setting my mental state for the day, because that initially I was just trying to do everything, and I couldn't do it all. And so when I carved out that time for a morning routine every day, that ultimately got me where I needed. It took a while for all of us to adjust, and it didn't happen every day, and now it is just part of like brushing my teeth. And so every morning, I spend time going through my Bible plan, doing some workout, just taking time to have some positive affirmations and be grateful. And then let's go. Let's get Willow ready for school. Let's make our plans for the day or for the week if I'm traveling, and organizing everything. So I think the biggest thing is just time management and pouring into myself first, and then also just figuring out ways to not have mom guilt when I'm away.
Ooh, I feel
so that I can come home and say, maybe I need to go to a movie with my friends tonight, and be okay with that because I've been away.
How do you feel a stereotype would play into this? Or just like, what's a stereotype that you even encounter being a working mom? Like, do people make comments in the workplace or have ideas of like, oh, Kim?
Well, I think I've been pretty, my teammates are all juggling a lot too. And so most of us, the people that I'm surrounded by, I don't feel like I'm judged, because we can really commiserate and go, man, we've got a lot on our plate, trying to hit all those goals and objectives and do the things that we have to do for work, and then also be at home. So, and I've got an amazing, manager who completely understands that, the work-life balance. So I have not run into that, gratefully, but maybe I just push that away. I'm used to, like, if there's something toxic, I'm just going to walk away from that. So I haven't felt that.
Yeah. How about you?
Mom guilt, yes.
Yes.
I think no matter where you're sitting at, whether you're at home full time, whether you're in work full time, or if you're trying to throw like both of those, because I know that like when I was working part time, I was missing usually at least 2 nighttime bedtimes a week, and like that was also like the balance is like work kept trying to push more because like you're not full time, so they perceive you to have all this extra time because you're not working full time. And then we, just the way that my husband had it, we didn't have childcare. We had his parents taking care of the kids a couple days a week, and his aunt was helping with the kids. So for us, that extra, that was what was making it work, is that we're not paying for childcare and we're able to, do that. But the struggle of just trying to keep boundaries at work, but I'm only here 20 hours a week. Like, you can't expect me to work like a full-time person and then come home and try to make that happen. So, and like, I didn't work with a lot of people with kids, but there was several moms that I worked with that were almost nasty to me because they were like, well, we just couldn't make that work in our family. And, it must be nice. A lot of those comments. And I know it comes from because we all carry around this guilt that we're not doing enough, or that I should be home, or I should, bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan and serve it for dinner. You know what I mean? So I try not to take it to heart, but it is like, well, why can't you just do it like everybody else? And then actually the reason that I stepped away is we chose to homeschool, and I got an extreme amount of pushback the year before I chose to step away and homeschool our kiddos, because they were like, I don't know if there's a spot for you anymore. Like, we're looking to fill this full-time position here. If I make this higher, I don't know where the rest of your workload is going to come from, and all of that. So there was just a lot of just workplace, we want more, and then it feeds into then not being able to be there at home, or like being short-fused with your kiddos. So like that part was hard. But my transition to motherhood, like full-time at home, was also like full of like a lot of preconceived notions. I thought I was going to get so much more done. And you don't realize that then, like, it's all hard no matter where you're at, whether you're at full-time trying to make all the things happen and still like then not feel guilty for carving time out because you're already gone, this amount of time. And then if you're at home, if you don't have a spouse that is like intentional about letting you have time, and also viewing that as a huge role at home, like it's so hard. But yeah, that was my like preconceived notion towards staying home full time, was that I was going to have a clean house.
It's all going to come together.
Yeah, like I'm no longer gone multiple nights a week. Like, I'm going to have a clean house. I'm going to have all the laundry done. Oh, good Lord, no. So yeah, like those were some of the challenges, and then the preconceived notions that I thought I was getting when I decided to stay home full time. So
yes. It's really good. Now we're going to dive into, I think I want to ask a couple questions like specifically to where you are in mom life. But one thing that I do think that we haven't brought into the conversation that I just want to acknowledge is the single moms, like the single moms that are out there working and maybe don't have the support of a spouse or family. And so in these conversations, we always want to say we see you and acknowledge you, and we want to cover as much as we can in this, but we are choosing to stay on these 3 topics, but that doesn't mean that we're not so aware of all the other roles that come into the mom culture and the different things that we all experience as women. And so we see you single moms, and we see you moms in different roles that you're at. So we don't want anybody to feel like they aren't on our minds as we're having these conversations, because it's hard.
That's a whole nother level of
It
capacity.
It is.
That's, yeah.
So when we think about the stay-at-home mom perspective, and Caitlin, this is kind of the portion that you're representing. Talk a little bit more about, I know we touched a little bit on the challenges, but some of the joys and maybe challenges, if there's any more you thought of since then, of being at home. Speak into that a little bit, especially like we have viewers from all different forms of life. So
honestly, so being a stay-at-home mom has always been my dream job, actually. Like when I was a little girl, like that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be a mom and I wanted to be at home. But kind of like you were saying, I don't think I really fully grasped like what that all entailed until I'm like living it. And then I'm like, oh, wow. Like, this is a lot, but it's also, I feel so grateful and so just blessed that I get to be that primary person in my boys' life, to shepherd them, to teach them, to introduce them to things, to help them learn and grow, to create a home culture, because I think it's even within the stay-at-home mom world, there's also varying different types of stay-at-home moms. And like for me personally, I feel very called to like homemaking, and I'm passionate about cooking. My background's in restaurants and stuff, and so I enjoy cooking good meals for my family and just cultivating those memories that I want my boys to have, and being super intentional with all those things. Those have been some of my greatest joys.
I love that. Have you ever felt judged or marginalized by other moms, either working or non-working?
Yeah. I think more than anything, I've felt misunderstood. And I don't know if like you can relate to that at all, but I feel like when you work, like when you're out and socializing and having conversations with people, you kind of always have that common thing of like, oh yeah, like I totally get the workforce and like this is what's happening. But unless you are a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home parent, like you've not really like fully experienced what it's like to be built in a home with your children for days on end, and like it's 24/7. Like if they need something, I have a newborn. He was up 2 or 3 times last night, and you get up and you do that, and you never get that separation and that space unless you are intentional about it. And so I think more than anything, like when I've been at like family functions or things like that, it's kind of people are like, they find out you're a stay-at-home mom and they're like, oh, okay. And then they kind of like move on to with the conversation because they just don't know how to what to ask you about.
Oh, what else is there's?
Yeah.
Is there anything more to say?
Yeah. Like, oh, like what do you like? Because they just don't have a concept of like what you do all day. And so I think that more than anything is like, I just think people don't know how to relate and how to engage a stay-at-home mom in conversation. And I think the other challenge with that is that a lot of times, like, I don't always know what I'm thinking. Like, I don't know what, like, you're just so like in that mode that it's hard to like shift out and be like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, my husband, he's extremely good at asking questions, and he'll ask me questions sometimes about like things that I'm feeling or processing. And I'm just like, sorry, what? Like, okay, give me a minute. Give me a minute here to think. Like, so not so much judged, but more just misunderstood.
Do you guys find in your circles or maybe other moms that you encounter that you're interacting with moms from different ways of life? Because I think our culture polarizes moms, because like even some of the things that you were saying, like our culture says, oh, well, Kim and Caitlin are not going to be friends, and they are going to be thinking things in their minds about each other because they're coming from different roles. Like I'm not trying, I mean, we're all coming like to put ourselves out on the table and we're all friends, but that's what our culture says is like Kim and Caitlin won't be friends, or they're going to, you know what I mean? So let's speak into that a little bit, because I think that's the uncomfortable part of momming and that.
So everything you were saying, I could resonate with completely, even though you're stay-at-home mom trying to figure out how to have a conversation, and maybe somebody pivots away from you because they're like, what do I talk to her about?
Yeah.
In where my daughter goes to school, there's only 20 kids in her class, and I just spent the last 2 days with a lot of the parents at a robotics competition. And so we really bonded this weekend, and it's crazy how different all of our worlds are, and what each parents are, each parent couple, the pairs of parents that were there, or just the one that manages all the kids' things and everything. Like, we always find a common ground that we can come to because we're still all moms. So it doesn't matter. And, you have to surround yourself you find your right tribe, right? So you surround yourself with the people that raise you up and that support you and, can hopefully just understand you, meet you where you're at. And so, saying that you're like on here and now you're trying to explain and talking to your husband about, what is it that, what am I feeling and all of these things. I mean, you just have to find ways to share what you're going through and meet those people where they're at, and hopefully you surround yourself with the right people. But it is challenging, I think, to just try to relate with someone. And, sometimes I'll get that same, oh, I don't even know what to say to her because she's doing all these things. I'm like, I'm not juggling any more than you. We are still, it's just different.
Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, I related so much when you start a conversation with someone. It's usually oh, so what do you do? And then, so if you either have a job or you don't have a job, and if you don't have a job, what does that mean? Well, it means that I stay home and don't get a break. But and when I stepped away from my job, that was the hardest conversation for me. When people would what do you do? And I'd always be like, well, I used to. Because so much of your identity is wrapped up in your job, or because that's just such a commonality between people. And you can talk about this, you can talk about that, and you can complain about your job or say how great it is or how fulfilling it is. But when you say I stay at home, suddenly I think that, especially if you're talking to another mom, depending on where they're at in their own journey of motherhood, they either have a ton of guilt that they're working because they're not secure in that situation, or they wish that they did this, or maybe they're in a really rough season at home and they're seeing behaviors. And I think that it can be so hard and triggering for people that have mom guilt, that they're failing in one area or another, that it's kind of one of those things that you just want to step over. And for me, I've almost been home a year now, and I'm still just trying to figure out what does this look like? How does this feel? And there are wins, but then also there's struggles, because so much of my identity was tied up in my education, and then I went to school for this, and you think that if you're not doing that, then was it a waste of everything that I did prior to? So I don't know. That just is kind of where my mind went when we talked about just starting up conversations with people outside of your of who you would normally talk to. So before when I was part-time, I felt I was straddling two worlds there for a while. I wasn't fully understanding what was going on full-time homemakers, and then I still wasn't pulling the 40 hours a week at a job. And so I was kind of floating in there in that middle space where you're just so I kind of get your struggles, but that 30 minutes of decompression before I go home is maybe enough for me to get it together and be Susie homemaker when I'm home. But then also I'm away from my kids long enough that I can be okay, that was a really bad day yesterday, but I'm not going to hold it against, my son, that we're going to start over fresh the next day. And that area of separation was a really sweet spot for me. But then it was really hard to relate to anybody else that wasn't in my same circumstance. So,
Caitlin, for you, what are some ways I think of Alex and Eric, and I when we're like on the podcast, I really bring like the female perspective. So I'm always like, this is really what it's like to be a woman in this situation right now. And I love them so much for that. And they're really receptive to that. So I know they're going to be listening. But I also think there's other people that are going to be listening too that aren't moms. And so what are some things that maybe men or husbands or just people that aren't moms might not understand or appreciate about a stay-at-home mom?
I think we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, and that is that unless, as a stay-at-home mom, unless you're intentional about carving out space and time for yourself, like it's not going to happen. Like you were mentioning, like if you have a commute or something like that, you have, even if it's only 30 minutes, you have that little bit of time in the car that you can kind of be alone and stuff. Like I can go in the bathroom and I can shut the door, but that does not guarantee that I'm going to be alone. Like
there's not going to be fingers underneath the door.
There's fingers on the door. There's pounding. There's like, you know, and that's
or there's quiet, and that's also scary.
That's also terrifying if it's too quiet. And a lot of that probably is just the season of motherhood that I'm in right now with littles. But I would say a big thing is for like a spouse or even like a friend is to maybe help carve out that space, or like asking moms like, hey, like, you know, do you want to go for a walk by yourself? I'll come over and hang out with the kids and you can go for a walk, or I don't know. And a lot of times my husband has to like force me to not like that, but like he's like, you need to go for a walk. You need to get out of the house. Like we've started this thing where I've been going to a coffee shop on Saturday mornings. Like I get up and I feed the baby and I go to a coffee shop down the road for a couple hours and I just get a little bit of me time. And I will come up with every excuse to not do that. Or like, I'm like, oh, well, I'm just going to throw the laundry in here really quick. He's like, out the door, go. Yes. And I think that sometimes it's not always like, I know there's things out there that people have like gone through and like assigned, like how much would it cost to have someone cook your meals every day? How much would it cost to have someone do your laundry? And like, when you actually like add it up, like the amount of money that I save our family by being home and like doing those things is actually like very substantial. And so that there is value in that. And yeah. So.
That makes me also think of one other thing. Sorry, we've got you in the hot seat, Caitlin. But I think that when you're talking about like, hey, how much money am I saving my family? Because another thing that I hear very often is, well, you went to college and you got this degree, or man, you were set up and you were doing this and you were going to have this career where you could make $100,000-$200,000. And what? And so how do you, when someone is like, well, you spent so much money on your education. I don't know if that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
Like, again, like that could sound so judgy from me.
Yeah.
I'm like representing something. That's not what I'm saying.
No. Yeah. I get where you're coming from.
Sometimes we feel like, you know, eggshells just because it's like, oh gosh, like there are all these misconceptions about motherhood and education.
Yeah. I think a lot of that like comes back to like, what's your vision for your family? And like, yeah. And I get that there's situations where it's like people are like, yeah, I would love to stay home with my kids, and that's not an option. Like that's not realistic.
Sometimes it's just not feasible.
Yeah. But I know for us, we have like, there are certain things that we don't do. And we have adjusted our lifestyle and everything in order for me to stay home with the boys. But it comes back to that, like that kingdom perspective, or like that, what am I trying to say here? The world tells us that our identity is in what we do. And so when you step away from that and you now don't have that, like the income producing activity, it's very easy to have that identity struggle and be like, okay, am I still valuable? Am I still worth something? I think a lot of times stay-at-home moms put a lot of pressure on themselves to overcompensate then and like do more at home and try to like prove worth and prove value. And like, okay, well, like you said, I'm going to have all the laundry done. I'm going to have the house clean. I'm going to have the meals cooked. I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to homeschool the kids. I'm going to like do everything. And it's just like, we're not omnipotent. there's only one person who is omnipotent. That's God. And so in this, we are reminded of our limits and our finiteness as humans, and that pushes us towards God. And it really like comes back to like questioning, like, and really identifying, like, who am I? Am I truly a daughter of God? Am I truly going to find my worth and significance in that? Or am I going to place it in these other things that I'm doing? And it's like crutches. Like, you don't really realize that you have those things until they're taken away. And then it's like, okay, what was I standing on before? So I feel... Oh,
do you ever notice that, like, when you're maybe struggling the most with that, it's paying attention to, like, what you're consuming? Like, I know that, like, if I've spent too much time, you know, on social media watching other people's highlight reels and then judging my everyday struggles with what people are putting out, you know, then that mom guilt, I feel like, can get intensified, you know, so much. And then you're sitting in that place where you're saying, well, I'm not even doing this. Well, I'm not even doing that. And then you're not even counting what you're getting done. And so, like, that made me think of just those moments where, like, I know that when I'm struggling with where I'm at in my parenting journey, or even as a mom and as a wife, if I've consumed too much of not what God tells me I am, but the world tells me of where I should be and what I should be doing, that I start thinking and double thinking about, oh, you know, I didn't get this done, I didn't do this, and then where is my worth coming from? Yeah, it's crazy the things that we allow ourselves to think about ourselves if we're not using God's measuring stick rather than the world's.
That's really good. And kind of thinking, you've shared a little bit about your perspective from being part-time, but how have you found, Stephanie, balance in kind of going in between both the worlds? You talked about that a little bit of just like having some transition time, but how have you navigated those challenges or balances that you've had to make?
I had to be really clear with my job that, like, I wasn't looking to climb the ladder. Like, that was not an option for me unless that was something that they could make happen at a part-time level. I had to be very clear and very intentional about, I am not working beyond this. Like, you have me 20 hours, use me how you'd like. But, like, I had to set really firm limits on that. And I would say the thing that the commute time was probably the best thing about it, is that moment of transition. And, like, that was the thing that I missed the most when I did go stay at home full time, is we usually had maybe, even like with my husband, like, we usually maybe had like an hour or two, like the in-laws would come pick up the kids before I went to work, and I'd have like an hour or two with my husband. He worked from home. And like those moments of no kids, or just to have like a moment, was like amazing. And those were really, like, we were in a sweet spot there for a while.
Yeah.
And so, like, making that happen, like, there was a lot of positives about it, and like I really enjoyed it. It worked really well for us. And then it took a little bit of a stumble there as we transitioned to being home, just because it was just different expectations. But at home for us, it worked pretty well. A lot of mom guilt though too.
Yeah.
Like, it's because, like, you question whether or not so am I really bringing in enough money to make this worth it? And then, am I missing too much at home? Because he's not there, but then am I allowing my in-laws to raise my kids? And that's not happening at 20 hours a week. Like, my in-laws are not raising my kids at 20 hours a week. But I think that there's a lot of just walking through what we allow ourselves to be told, and what we allow even the devil to tell us, because he is the best liar in the world. And, he has the best way of finding a small little truth and then twisting it just enough to make you worry about it. And for me, it's just really when we were walking through that season, telling myself that if God wanted me to do it a different way, he'd open a door. And so that's been the way that we've navigated it, is until that door opened, we were just going to keep moving forward.
What would you guys say, and I'd love to hear from all of you, of there's this pressure to conform, like from the role that you have. And so I would say, like, even Stephanie, for you, it's like, oh, you should either be all in working, all in this. Like, there's all these pressures of like, oh, well, Kim, like, do you have to do it this way, or things like that. But how have you navigated that pressure to conform and really step into, it sounds like you guys have gone through on your journey where it's like, God is really leading me into this role and he's really guiding me and showing me where I'm supposed to be. But how have you navigated that pressure to conform?
Boy, I'll start. I've had you go through seasons even within parenthood. You know, I'm in a whole new chapter of new emotions and everything as she's growing up, and and just different types of busy. You know, first we had some time where I was home for a long time during the pandemic, and that was a whoa, stop, and oh, what would this be like? And I felt what it was like to be a stay-at-home mom because I never left the house, and I was so used to, my daughter only knew me being gone every week for 1 or 2 days. And so as you juggle all of these things, there's always an expectation from everyone around you. And so, like you said, you have to focus, you have to be intentional, you have to walk with God, you have to trust God, and you have to say, it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's none of my business, right? But that's a struggle every single day.
It's like something we have to tell ourselves every single day.
Right? Like I pull a card, an affirmation card every single morning because I know the mean girl in my brain is going to tell me all these stupid things all day long. I should be doing this. Oh, now I'm going to miss this. And, I can do my best to juggle around and make sure I'm home for that recital or I'm home for whatever that is. And, whatever's critical right now. And I want to focus 100% on being home for my daughter. And that's just not how our life is. That's not, I'm the one that's the income earner, right? So, and we chose that, we have a beautiful blend and a wonderful family unit, thankfully. And I am so grateful that I get to have the best of both worlds. I get to continue to be that career woman, but I have that commuter time. I have that time where I'm just like, okay, as my husband says, okay, I can see you. You still have your work mode face on. So he knows when I'm not ready and plugged in. So there might be hey, just go do what you need to do, finish it, and then go spend time with her or us, or let's go to dinner or whatever. So we have to be communicating with each other all the time and open and sharing. So we have, daily husband-wife meetings. It's like, okay, what's going on this week? Being very intentional and knowing that we can juggle it all. We can't worry about what other people think. It's our situation. They're not walking in our shoes, and we have to trust that God has got our path for us. And every morning, wake up, be grateful, and it works. It's not easy. It's hard, but if you can be intentional. I'm intentional when I'm working and I'm full on. I've always been a career person. And then all of a sudden, bam, oh, I have a husband and a daughter that I had never planned in my life, and the greatest blessing in the world. The best job is to be a mom. So I have to do my best to be completely 100% intentional when I'm with her. And so it's actually probably forced me with all the busyness to be very intentional with her because I can separate the two. But sometimes I need that decompression time. Yeah. I just need that time to say, okay, out of work mode, shut it down. Now let's do this. And it's a blessing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything you guys have to add? I feel like that was really good.
No, I agree with you 100%. And that's the mentality that somebody else's opinion of me is none of my business. And being just stay in your own lane. Because if the more you verge out and start worrying about what other people's thoughts are about the way that you live your life, it'll crush you.
And I think maybe to speak to if there's a soon-to-be mom listening to this or somebody who's in a situation where they're kind of trying to process that, I think really praying and asking, am I making this decision out of faith or out of fear? Because I think you can choose both out of fear. Like, you can choose to stay home with your kids and be a stay-at-home mom out of fear of like, well, I don't want anyone else taking care of them. I don't want anything to happen to them. Even if you feel like God's calling you into some sort of career, you're like, no, I'm just going to stay home. I'm just going to protect them and keep them in my bubble. But on the flip side, you couldn't make a decision to work out of fear of like, well, we're not going to have any finances and we're not going to have provision. And so I'm going to go work in order to make that happen. So if you feel God calling you to one or the other, really trusting that and stepping into that fully and just being like, okay, Lord, like, I'm going to trust that if you are calling me into the workforce, that you will provide opportunities and outlets and ways for my children to be cared for while I'm in that work situation. And if you're calling me into the home, I'm going to trust that you're going to provide financially for my family in ways that I am not. And really, I think when we step into that and we walk into that, we will see his faithfulness and his blessing in those things in ways that maybe we didn't think that would happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. I feel like we need to like pause. Everybody pause, rewind 5 minutes, re-listen, because wherever you are in life, how much the truth that you all just spoke into how God views us and how we should be viewing ourselves in whatever role that we're in and how we're looking at our identity. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, welcome back from your 5-minute rewind and coming back. Kim, I want to hear a little from you about just being the full-time mom. And I don't know if there's any other struggles or challenges that you've thought of, but how does that balance look like for you in the challenges, in all the things that we've kind of talked about so far? What thoughts are going through your...
I think just listening to everyone, I feel like we're all on the same page, as I
Yes.
said, coming at it differently and living day to day differently, but we ultimately have this thread woven throughout, we're all moms, right?
I love
and
that.
we have to juggle a lot of things and we have to battle the crazy voices in our head sometimes. And so, I think it's about faith and intentionality. I will come back to those two things over and over again. And so the struggle is real. Every day there are a lot of things to be dealing with, whether it's stress at work. For me, I have a very high pressure job. And so, I can get wrapped up in that very easily. And so I have the fortune of having a husband and a daughter that give me an outlet and give me something to walk away from where I'd spent my entire adult life being in career mode and independent and single and, just never having to account for anyone else. And once I realized, about 1.5 years into my daughter's life that, wow, I am not doing this right and I can't burn the candle at both ends anymore. I have to do something different. And so that's when I learned to pour into myself first. And boy, that was a year of total guilt. I'm taking 30 minutes in the morning to be with God and do some exercise. Wow, why is that such a terrible thing? Why do we get such grief over that? And so, that was something that it was a huge adjustment, but completely for the better for our family. And now it's an expectation. Like they just know, and my daughter used to joke and say, Mom, are you getting ready to work out? Because she got screen time. Aren't you going to do
Mom,
your workout,
don't
Mom?
you want to go work out?
That's accountability right there.
So I had my accountability buddy, right? So that was, it's just expected. But it was a huge adjustment because it's just you get up and you go. And the next thing you know, oh my gosh, where did the day go? And what have we done for ourselves? What have we, so we have, I guess, a special approach to, I think, just something that we focus on where we have our alone time. We all like to go into our little shells. We have our own introvert time, and then we have our family time. And we balance all of that with, my travel schedule and all the things that need to be done with her school and everything. So it's, I just see all of us completely aligned and
Yes.
juggling all
Yeah.
the things.
Also, Kim, I feel like you sound like you have a lot of wisdom and you have a lot of balance and boundaries around work and home life. But can you speak to maybe a new working mom or someone that's a couple years in that's kind of facing those society's pressures of, you're like the mom guilt that we've kind of talked about, but what advice would you give to someone that's maybe like right in the thrusts of how do I do this? Or is this the right thing?
Sure. So you have to find God and you have to find yourself. You have to. Like, no matter what, you have to prioritize your faith. If you don't have your faith, I don't know what to tell you. But secondly, you have to prioritize yourself, no matter what. And I run a wellness coaching as a side passion because I need something else to do. And so that's something that I'm constantly pouring into people, which gives me accountability too, right? To just say, okay, are you eating right? Are you nourishing your body? Are you hydrating? Did you sleep? Did you pray this morning? Did you meditate? Did you, whatever it is that you're finding, sharing the universe, whatever you believe in, and then believing in yourself. And so those are the staples, I think, that are an absolute requirement. So that might be at night. For me, it's in the morning. It's how I start my day because it sets the tone for the entire day. And so, having very actionable things to do that ultimately help me, kind of celebrate those small wins and whatever that is, and appreciate the little things that we get to do. Because I feel you when you say, I'm trying to do these things, but if I scroll on social for long enough, I'll be nothing, right?
Right.
And so it comes really quickly where you can have this imposter syndrome and think that everybody else is doing it right and you're doing it wrong. And you're not. You're incredible. And you have to believe in yourself and believe in God. And that's my foundation that keeps me going every day. Gratitude when I wake up and gratitude when I go to bed, and pouring that into my relationship with my husband and pouring that and teaching that to my daughter.
I love that. Also thinking about working full time and then thinking about Alex and Eric, who aren't here, who will again be listening. Boys, listen up. What are some things that we think that, like, I'm using them as an example, but just like people that aren't in the full-time working mom role, men, husbands, or just other people might not understand or appreciate about what you do?
Sometimes, typically, I think the easiest way to share with someone is to find something common, something that you have in common with them. So often we do icebreakers at work and things like that, right? Where you get to know someone. And so if you meet them where they're at and you can explain, and it's not just that, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Those types of things where you have labels on yourself and identity. So, there are ways in which you can, I think, back to your original question too, not only just other men in our lives, but women who are early in their career and trying to now have a family and juggle all of that. Again, it's always being intentional and also finding a circle. Like I said, early,
community.
Finding community. It's so important. And that's something I tell in my wellness group. You can't do this alone. That's why we're here for you. You're not going to do this alone. And that's what I did for so many years. So it was easy for me to flip the script and say, okay, I get it. That was so silly of me to think that I could do all of these things and really be the best mom and wife and worker that I could be, and I wasn't. I was fooling myself. And so I think giving yourself grace, giving yourself the ability to make mistakes, and it's okay, and also then find ways that you can celebrate every week something that you did, and gratitude every single day has really gotten me to where I am and continue to have that positive growth mindset by being grateful and knowing that what I did today was good enough, and it's great, and we're all alive. Everything is good. So.
Amen. Well, I feel like we could have a whole nother hour. I feel like we're just like scratching the surface of all of our experiences and all the things that each of us as moms bring to the table. And thank you so much for sharing today. I think that one big thing that you guys have demonstrated, and I've really wanted to do, is just to show that empathy that's between moms and how we are all going through similar things. I think, Kim, you said some great things about how we're all on the same page and we're all kind of dealing with the same stuff. It just looks different. And so I hope this built empathy and how moms can support and uplift each other regardless of our choices, our circumstances, and where we're at. And so thank you for joining us. And thank you, those of you at home and that are listening to us, for joining us. We love that you join us every week. And thank you so much for being here. If you want to leave us a voicemail, we love hearing from you, 402-885-9930. But until next time, uncomfies, we'll talk to you then.